All right, so get ready, because today we're going deep on something super interesting, presidential approval ratings.
Ooh, approval ratings.
But here's the twist.
Okay.
We're not just looking at approval ratings overall, we're focusing on the differences between how men and women view presidents.
Interesting.
It's this thing called the gender gap.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And it's been it's a pattern, a consistent pattern for decades.
Right.
We've got Gallup poll data going all the way back to 2001,
Wow.
all the way to 2024. So we're talking over 20 years, 4 presidencies,
That's a lot of data.
to really see how this gap, how it plays out.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you know what's really cool is that Gallup, they're like the gold standard when it comes to polling, right?
Oh, yeah, they're like the OG.
Yeah, exactly. And they use a very specific way to get this data. Very consistent methodology.
So we can really compare across all this time. That's important.
Exactly. Yeah. So they regularly survey Americans. Ask them this really simple question. Do you approve or disapprove of the way the president's handling his job?
Straightforward.
Yeah, but super powerful. And the fact that they've been doing this for decades,
Yeah.
consistently,
Consistently.
gives us a really solid foundation to analyze the trends we're going to talk about.
That's what I love about Gallup. They've got this long history, and they just do things right, so you know the data's reliable.
Exactly. You ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Watch them all drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
Zoom out for a second. Big picture. What's the overall trend we see when we look at this data?
So the biggest, most consistent trend is that men tend to give higher approval ratings
Okay.
to Republican presidents.
So higher approval for Bush and Trump
Exactly.
from men.
Yep.
Okay, interesting.
And on the flip side, women tend to favor Democrat.
I remember those early days after 9/11.
Yeah.
Felt like the whole country was united,
Right. And the Gallup data really reflects that.
It does.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right after those attacks, both men and women
Yeah.
gave Bush incredibly high approval ratings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Men's approval even got up to the high 80s.
That's really high.
It was a period of intense national unity.
Yeah.
But as we know,
Yeah.
it didn't last.
That sense of unity, kind of fizzles out pretty quickly when
Yeah.
you look at the numbers.
Uh-huh.
By the end of his presidency, those ratings, they tanked, especially for women.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Almost a mirror image of what we see with Obama a few years later.
You're saying Obama had higher approval among women.
Yes, right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And that gap stayed pretty consistent
Interesting.
throughout his 2 terms.
So it really highlights that tendency for women to favor the Democratic presidents.
Right.
Like we talked about earlier.
Right.
So it seems like Bush and Obama fit the mold.
Yeah.
Republican president does better with men, Democratic president with the women.
Uh-huh.
But I have a feeling things get a little more complex with
Yeah.
President Trump, right?
You could say that the gender gap during Trump's presidency was massive.
How massive are we talking?
One of the widest ever recorded.
Wow.
Some polls showed a difference of over 20 percentage points.
20 points. That's huge.
Yeah, between men and women's approval ratings.
That's a chasm, not a gap.
Right.
What could have caused such a stark divide?
Remember how we talked about that foundation of party affiliation?
Yeah.
Well, with Trump, we see other factors really coming into play.
Like what?
His stances on issues like reproductive rights
Oh.
and immigration. which often resonate deeply with women,
Right.
likely played a significant role.
It makes sense. I mean, Trump was such a polarizing figure.
Yeah.
And issues like reproductive rights,
Right.
they tap into those really deeply held values.
Yeah.
So where does Biden fit into all of this?
Yeah.
Does he continue the trend?
Well, in a way, Biden's presidency brings us back to that familiar pattern.
Okay.
He consistently enjoys higher approval among women,
Mm-hmm.
lower approval among men.
So the pendulum swings back.
Exactly.
But something I've noticed is that Biden's overall approval ratings
Okay.
for both men and women
Yeah.
seem way more moderate
Yeah.
compared to, like, Obama.
That's a good observation,
Yeah.
and it lightly reflects the political climate we're living in now.
So more polarized than ever.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's just harder for any president to achieve those, like, sky-high approval ratings.
Yeah, like we saw in the past.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this persistent gender gap
Right.
playing out across these 4 very different presidencies.
Uh-huh.
But the big question I have
Yeah.
is why?
That's the question.
Why does this gap even exist?
We're going to unpack that next.
Okay.
Get ready to go deeper, because this is where things get really fascinating.
All right, I'm ready.
We're going to unravel the reasons behind this gender gap,
Okay.
going beyond just party affiliation
Uh-huh.
and exploring how different policy priorities,
Right.
leadership styles,
Okay.
and even reactions to major events contribute to this phenomenon.
All right, I'm ready. Let's do it. Okay, so let's get into the why.
The why.
Why does this gender gap in presidential approval ratings exist?
Okay.
You mentioned policy priorities playing a role,
Yeah.
and I'm curious to explore that a little bit more.
Absolutely. It's a key piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
You see,
Yeah.
different groups in society often have different priorities when it comes to
Uh-huh.
what they want from their government.
Right.
And this difference in priorities is reflected in how men and women
Okay.
view the president.
So could you give us some examples of those different priorities?
Yeah.
Like what kinds of things are we talking about here?
Well, for many women,
Yeah.
healthcare is a major concern.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Gallup polls consistently show like
Yeah.
a 10 to 15% higher approval for Obama among women
Wow.
when asked about his handling of the Affordable Care Act.
Interesting.
And it goes beyond just access to health care.
Right.
Issues like affordable child care and paid family leave
Right.
are also incredibly important to women.
Yeah.
They're looking for a president who understands and addresses these concerns.
So they want a president who's like in touch with the needs of families.
Exactly.
Someone who like gets the challenges of
Yeah.
juggling work and family life.
Right. And these are often policy areas championed by the Democratic Party.
Right.
Now, this isn't to say that men don't care about these issues,
Of course.
but
Yeah.
when we look at the data,
Uh-huh.
we see that these issues tend to be
Yeah.
a higher priority for women.
Okay. So if those are some of the top priorities for women,
Right.
what about men?
Good question.
What issues are they looking to the president to address?
Men tend to prioritize things like
Yeah.
economic policy, national security,
Huh.
smaller government.
Got it.
These themes are often emphasized
Right.
by Republican candidates.
Right.
For example, during the 2008 economic crisis,
Yeah.
polls showed men were more likely to support policies
Uh-huh.
focused on things like tax cuts and deregulation,
Okay.
which were often touted as solutions for
Yeah.
stimulating business growth
Right.
and job creation.
So it's not just about liking one party or the other.
Right.
It's more nuanced than that.
Exactly.
It's about which party is seen
Yeah.
as better equipped to handle the issues
Right.
that matter most to each gender.
You got it. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, and that leads us to another layer of this gender gap leadership style.
Yeah.
Ooh, this is something I find so fascinating.
It's interesting.
We've seen such different leadership styles
Right.
from the presidents we've talked about.
Yeah.
And I can see how those differences might resonate differently
Right.
with men and women.
Like, is there data on that?
yeah,
Yes. Research has shown that men and women may actually react
wow.
differently to certain leadership approaches.
Interesting.
For instance, a study from the University of Chicago
Okay.
found that women were more likely to rate leaders higher
Okay.
who displayed empathy and collaboration.
Interesting.
Men, on the other hand,
Yeah.
tended to favor leaders who projected an image of strength and decisiveness.
It's interesting to think about how, like, those perceptions
Oh, yeah.
of what makes a strong leader are often shaped by
Absolutely.
societal expectations and, like, gender roles.
For sure.
But couldn't one argue
Right.
that focusing too much on these differences, like,
Yeah.
reinforces stereotypes?
That's a good point.
I mean, aren't there plenty of women who value strong leadership
Absolutely.
with men who appreciate collaboration.
Totally. And it's important to remember that
Yeah.
we're talking about broad trends here,
Right. Okay.
not hard and fast rules
Gotcha.
that apply to every individual. But the fact that these differences in leadership preferences
Yeah.
show up consistently in the data
Okay.
suggests that there's something deeper at play here.
Interesting.
It reflects how our views on leadership
Right.
are often shaped by our experiences and the messages we receive about what it means to be a man or a woman
Okay.
in our society.
It makes me think about the different ways
Yes.
men and women are often portrayed
Right.
in media and pop culture.
Exactly.
That must play a role in shaping perceptions, too.
Absolutely. The media landscape plays a huge role
Yeah.
in how we perceive our leaders.
Okay.
Think back to the 2008 economic crisis.
Okay.
Conservative media often framed the economic recovery under Obama
Uh-huh.
as sluggish and ineffective,
Right.
while more liberal outlets
Yeah.
highlighted the positive impact
Okay.
of social safety net programs expanded under his administration.
Okay. So it's like,
These different narratives
Yeah.
likely influenced how men and women,
Right.
with their varying priorities,
right.
perceived his overall performance.
It's like we're living in different information bubbles,
Yeah, exactly.
exposed to different narratives that reinforce our existing beliefs.
It's true.
Right.
And social media has only amplified this phenomenon,
Yeah, totally.
creating echo chambers where people are mainly exposed to information
Yeah.
that aligns with their pre-existing views.
So I've got party affiliation,
Yeah.
different policy priorities, leadership styles, and the media
Uh-huh.
all influencing how men and women view the president.
Right.
Are there any other factors at play here?
Good question.
What about how men and women react
Okay.
to major events,
Okay.
like wars or economic crises?
Yes.
Do those reactions differ as well?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something we need to consider.
Okay.
Remember those high approval ratings Bush enjoyed after 9/11?
Yeah, we talked about how those were
Right.
sky high for both men and women.
Right. But that initial unity
Yeah.
faded. As the war in Iraq dragged on
Okay.
and the focus shifted to issues like
Yeah.
the economy and healthcare,
Right.
while both men and women
Uh-huh.
were affected by these issues,
Yeah.
their preferred solutions often differed.
So even in a crisis, those underlying differences
Exactly.
in priorities still come into play.
Yes.
Like we're seeing the same event
Right.
through different lenses,
Yeah.
with each lens
Yeah.
shaped by our
Yeah.
experiences, values, and priorities.
You got it. That's a great analogy.
Right.
It highlights just how complex and multifaceted
Okay.
this gender gap really is.
Yeah.
It's not a simple equation with a single answer.
Right.
It's this dynamic interplay of political, social,
Yeah.
and cultural factors.
Okay, after all this unpacking and analyzing,
Right.
I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like this intricate tapestry with
Well-
all these interwoven threads.
That's true.
So where do we even go from here?
That's the crucial question.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to delve into next.
Okay.
Because understanding this gap isn't just about academic curiosity.
Okay.
It has real-world implications
Right.
for how we think about
Yeah.
leadership,
Okay.
elections, and the very fabric of our democracy.
Oh, okay. All right. So big stuff.
Big stuff.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so we've explored the what and the why
Yeah.
of this gender gap in presidential approval ratings.
Right.
Now let's talk about the so what.
The so what?
Why should our listeners care
Yeah.
about these differences?
Yeah. Why does this matter?
It's crucial because
Right.
understanding this gap has real-world implications.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, it highlights that
Yeah.
the electorate isn't this like single-minded block.
Okay.
Men and women experience and prioritize politics differently.
Right.
This isn't about saying
Okay.
one way of thinking is better than the other.
Right.
It's about
Yeah.
recognizing
Yeah.
that those differences exist
Uh-huh.
and matter.
Okay, so how does this translate
Okay.
into real-world impacts?
Think about elections.
Okay.
Candidates can't just rely on a generic platform anymore.
Right.
They need to understand those nuances
Yeah.
in what resonates with men and women.
It's like those targeted ads we see online.
Right.
But for politics,
Exactly.
tailor the message to speak to those
Yeah.
specific values and concerns of each group.
Precisely.
Right.
Imagine a campaign that addresses
Okay.
women's anxieties
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
affordable childcare
Okay.
and the rising cost of healthcare,
Right.
while also speaking to the concerns men might have about
Yeah.
economic stability and job security.
Okay, so it sounds like
Right.
the key is finding that common ground
Yeah.
where those different priorities intersect.
Exactly.
But with such a stark divide,
Right.
is that even possible?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy one. It demands open dialogue,
Okay.
active listening,
Right.
and a genuine willingness to understand
Yeah.
perspectives that are different from our own.
That sounds like a tall order
It is.
in today's political climate.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's retreating
Right.
further into their own echo chambers,
Yeah.
and the divides keep getting deeper.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners?
Okay.
What can they do with this knowledge?
First, become aware of your own biases
Okay.
and priorities.
Yeah.
What issues matter most to you?
Yeah.
How do those priorities shape your view
Right.
of political leaders and the policies they support?
It's like checking your internal compass
Exactly.
before setting out to
Right.
navigate this crazy political landscape.
Right. And then, and this is crucial,
Okay.
engage in respectful dialogue
Okay.
with people who hold different viewpoints.
Right.
Listen, learn,
Uh-huh.
and try to understand where they're coming from.
It's about building bridges instead of walls.
Right. That's it.
But what about the candidates themselves?
Okay.
What role do they play in bridging this gap?
They need to step up
Okay.
and address the issues that resonate
Uh-huh.
with both men and women.
Right.
It's not about making empty promises.
Okay.
It's about demonstrating
Yeah.
a genuine understanding
Right.
of the diverse needs and aspirations of the
Okay.
electorate.
So it sounds like it's about leadership
Yes.
that can transcend those divides,
Yeah.
finding ways to unite
Uh-huh.
rather than further divide.
You hit the nail on the head.
Right.
That's the ultimate challenge
Yeah.
and the ultimate opportunity
Oh.
for any president
Right.
seeking to lead a nation as diverse and complex as ours.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
I feel like we've only just begun to scratch the surface.
That's the beauty of it.
Tonight's topic.
This conversation about gender and politics
Right.
is ongoing,
Yeah.
ever evolving. It's up to each of us to stay engaged.
Yeah.
Keep questioning and keep striving
Okay.
for a more inclusive and representative democracy.
Well said. Huge thank you to our expert for
Yeah.
all of these amazing insights.
My pleasure.
And to all of you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
Remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
The more we understand these complex dynamics,
Absolutely.
the better equipped we are
Yeah,
to navigate the world around us.
for sure.
Until next time, stay curious.
Stay here.
Stay informed and stay engaged.
Stay engaged.
This is the Deep Dive signing off.
That was